Hi, it's me, InnerDynFP, and welcome to my channel on 2025. We're going to be talking about some signs that I was autistic, that maybe somebody could have told my parents when I was growing up. So this is going to be childhood, but also teenage years, and even later on in adulthood. Signs that could have pointed people in the right direction. That's extremely vague. There are obviously a lot of signs probably, but these are those that I could come up with. I wrote a little list down. So I got diagnosed 3 months ago at the age of 28. And I didn't start becoming autistic at the age of 28. I have always been. And I was reminded of this because yesterday was New Year's Eve and I spent it with a friend of my mom's and her husband. So this friend of my mom met them when she was in Sweden learning Swedish. She took a class offered by the government to learn Swedish, and she became friends with this Peruvian woman. And this Peruvian woman was one of the only people who visited me when I was born at the hospital. And she knitted me a little sweater when I was a newborn. She got married to a very Swedish man. So they're very different cultures, Peru and Sweden. But her husband is a military guy with a handlebar mustache who likes to eat ham and drink beer, and is in general, a kind of guy with very bad humor and not the kind of person that I would associate with usually. But here we are. This woman was very important to my mom and a good support to my mom. And like my mom's only friend, I think, when she was in Sweden. She had maybe a few other friends, but she was her best friend. And, I was born premature and it was November in Sweden and it was lonely. So I think that it was important for my mom. And this woman has kept a plant that my mom gave her for this plant is as old as me. So that's quite heartwarming, that she has kept that. This couple I've visited several times when I was a child, and we haven't seen each other since I was about 10 to 12 or something. That was maybe the last time they saw me, or 12 maybe. So that was like 20 years ago or something like that. So I recognize them, but I am much older and taller, and they are much older as well. And it was an awkward situation because now I'm supposed to have an adult conversation with these people that are essentially strangers to me, but then know me from my childhood. And so I went and visited them at their hotel. And this hotel is the place to be for New Year's Eve in my town because nothing else happens except apparently this hotel had karaoke for New Year's Eve. So I left before things started getting crazy in there after around 1.5 hours, something like that. I couldn't manage more. But it was difficult having conversation because it's like basic small talk. They want to know how my parents are doing. I don't know. I try to be honest, while at the same time I don't want to hurt my parents' reputation, and I don't want, I want to say the right thing. And then in the middle of all this, then comes the childhood memories, and they have memories of me that I don't remember, which is strange. So the first thing is that I took up that their dog was the dog that traumatized me for life. I did not say that that, but I said that their dog, I remember their dog, and he was very big, and that was scary to me. That's what I said. And they're like, oh, he was so good with children. And, you know, their idea of good with children is like a dog that jumps on children, is very excited around children. In that case, yes, he was good with children. But because I was an autistic kid, I think I disliked that fact, and I would rather have had a calm dog. I would say that is a nice dog for an autistic kid who is very sensitive to all kinds of noise and movement and touch. So yeah, that's kind of the start of the conversation. So I said, you know, that kind of, you know, traumatized me or whatever. But I didn't say that it traumatized me for life and it got me a phobia of dogs. I didn't tell him that. But, you know, this was a Doberman in a small apartment. It wasn't the best environment for this dog. But I don't want to, you know, criticize them or insult them in any way. So I didn't say that. But anyway, then they went and said, well, you know what, so this husband, he said, well, you know what traumatized me? You were the most stubborn kid that I've ever met. And I was like, what? So it does not surprise me. He was trying to put it in as like it was a joke, but I know that it's true, you know? So he was telling a story of how I was taken to the Natural History Museum, and he and his wife had to babysit, but it basically became him who had to like take me around the Natural History Museum. And I know I really liked the Natural History Museum because I liked seeing all the animals there and all the fossils, and it's interactive and it was fun. And I just really liked museums as a kid, I think. And there was a little farm outside that had farm animals, or it was like an enclosure, like a petting zoo or something like that. And I mean, nowadays I don't think that they have that petting zoo, but they had that at that time. And there were pigs, and pigs were my favorite animal. And I was so interested in those pigs that I would not leave the pig enclosure. Like, I was there, and I would not let other kids come near me to see the pigs, because I just wanted to sit there and watch the pigs. And I actually told him, apparently, that I'm supposed to be here. I'm not going there, I'm supposed to be here. So he dragged me out, like, away from the pigs, and then I would see another animal, and then I would be like, now I'm going to be here, you know? You know? And I wouldn't want to leave, you know? And so the transitions, I think, was a difficult thing for me. I think that I also had the monotropic thinking, like I, like, kind of, this is, all children kind of go through this phase, but I think that I was even more like this than the regular child, that it was like, I'm not sharing, I'm going to do what I want because this is the most interesting thing in the world right now. And so I think that I had a special interest around pigs at that time. They were, I don't know, I really liked them. I found them really cute, and I thought that I wanted to own a pig someday. And so I don't know how old I was. I must have been around like 5 or 6 or something, but I don't remember this whole story. But yeah, it kind of clocks in with my behavior. I've always been stubborn, and people have always told me that even before I knew the word stubborn was. I learned the word for stubborn when I was doing art. Like in primary school, I would often do these art workshops at the local art museum. And, you know, it was €4 for 4 hours, which was a good deal. So my mom like left me there and kind of was like a babysitting service. Um, but I really liked doing the art. And then, but I would not let anybody like give me any suggestions. I would just do my thing, and the like teachers there would, or teachers, just the people who animated the workshop, they knew, you know, I'd been there a few times. They knew that once I had an idea, like nobody was going to stop me. And then it was like, she's stubborn, like a mule. That's what they would tell me. Well, or t'es-tu comme un âne? And I did not know what that meant. I thought that donkeys were not liked, I realized. So I thought maybe that meant that people thought I was dumb. But it was actually that it meant stubborn. So I learned the word for stubborn there. And I realized that a lot of people would call me that throughout the years. But yeah, I think that it is because, first of all, of that like monotropic thinking, the difficulty with transitions, and you know, the intense focus, and then the pathological demand avoidance, I guess, because I did not like being told what to do. It just like got me into like fight or flight mode, I guess. And it was surprising for people because I was always the good girl who did not want to get into any trouble. So I would always do what I was told. You know, I would sit in my seat and I would do the thing, and I was well behaved and everything. But then like this weird kind of stubborn rage would come into me, and yeah, people didn't know what that meant. So yeah, that's a big part of this. So I've gone on a little bit too long about that specific thing, but I think that was important because I've always been pretty stubborn. Another thing is that I had that rigid thinking throughout my childhood and throughout teenage years and early adulthood. I think that I've gotten much better with that, but I used to be very categorical about like what I would do and what I would not do. And so I would not shave, I would not do makeup, I would not drink. I was very much like rigid to the point where people thought that I was very judgmental. And it wasn't like I was judging them, it was more like I did not want that for myself, so I would just like avoid that. But it did make like teenage life difficult, you know. And I think maybe somebody could have asked me why I was so adamant about certain things being a certain way. But I guess people never did, because I was always kind of nice about it. I wasn't like, and also people saw that I was in my own world, and so they didn't like come in to barge in, which I'm glad for. I'm glad that I wasn't forced to conform in a certain pattern, a certain way of being, because that meant that I still had some freedom to be myself, so I'm glad. Another thing is that I asked a year ago about, on my Instagram, if anybody had seen any autism symptoms in me, because I was in the middle of like my whole journey thing for my diagnosis, and nobody answered except for my English teacher from high school, Mrs. Zanin, who said that I was tired. I looked like I had the glazed look to me sometimes at the end of the day, when which she recognized in her child, because she has a child who has congenital problems. I don't really know. I think that her child has seizures, and I think that she has neurological differences as well. So I think that maybe this child has autism, I don't know. But I had a similar look to me during my school days. You know, these are things that people notice but never like really took to the end, you know. Another thing is that, I didn't shower very often, and people didn't. I don't know if people noticed or not, but I do think that people probably noticed more than I thought. And I'm thinking, if I was abused at home, maybe I would have wanted somebody to look into that. Like if I was neglected by my parents, and that's kind of a thing that you would see is children who come sloppy clothes and just sloppy in general. I think that I was very sloppy and not put together, and it's not bad, it's not a flaw, but it is often a sign of something not quite right at home. And I'm glad, I guess, that nobody checked up on my parents and called social services, but maybe somebody could have asked. I know it's difficult because you don't want to say, oh, you smell or whatever, that's never good. But children will notice it even if the teachers don't. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that, but maybe that combined with everything else could lead to just a second thought about me. I was always a little oblivious, a little naive. I didn't understand what was going on. Mostly this is my friends seeing this. And one of those things was I didn't understand boyfriends. I didn't understand how people decided that they would be boyfriend and girlfriend. Do they actually go to each other and say, are we boyfriends now that we kissed? Or did they say that they were dating and then kiss? Or when did they decide that they're starting to date? A boy and a girl going out together. I was still very confused about that, and I would say that I maybe still am confused now. I was very confused about that even when I was sexually harassed at 19. I was on the couch with this guy who was starting to kiss me, and in my mind, one of the stupid questions that came up was, does this mean that we're boyfriend and girlfriend? That's the kind of simplistic thought, I guess, that maybe would be more complex if I was more adept at navigating social situations. But I wasn't, I guess. I was like, how does this thing go in real life? I've watched movies and such, but in movies, you always have all the subtext that is explicitly shown to you that oh, they're looking at each other more now, or they have this certain line of dialogue that is considered significant. That's why it's in the movie, because it's significant. In real life, a lot of things happen, that is just fluff. But it's not just fluff, because all these things together build towards something. But it's not clear that this is the thing that made him fall in love. That's a simplistic way of thinking that is kind of shows a little bit my lack of mentalization. I couldn't figure out how other people were navigating these situations and how I should navigate that situation. So, and that was a thing from when I was very small. I didn't understand what people were doing in their friendships. All this drama, I could not understand. And my friends must have known about this, and adults saw this as well. I mean, they must have realized. I had, often we had to read books in school, and sometimes people would really relate to a character, and I would not relate at all. And I would relate to a completely different character. And I don't think that might have been something that somebody would have seen, but maybe sometimes my essays were kind of sometimes teachers would be like, you're not understanding the subject. And I don't think I always understood the instructions. I would think I would understand them, but then I was like, wait, no. Nobody else misunderstood this except for me. So that was confusing. Another thing is that my friends, when I was 15, said that I was cynical and pessimistic. And I was like, well, no, I'm not pessimistic. I'm just realistic. And it's true. I think that it was because I was honest and too honest, you know, and sometimes I felt like life was shit because I was depressed at that point. And instead of finding like the right thing to say that to make everybody happy, I just said what I thought. And my point wasn't to put everybody down, but because I didn't have the social skills, I would just say something that was wrong for the situation. And I guess that it was just put up as one of my quirks, but I didn't want to be pessimistic. But it was just, that's how I presented myself, I guess. Another thing is that I was shitty at sports, which was mostly, I guess, because of dyspraxia, that I was very clumsy. And I was confused because the teachers would say that I'm not trying hard enough. And when I was like doing my best, I couldn't do anything better, you know? And I was always one of the worst. And there was this one teacher who said that I was not trying when I was really trying. It was this like gymnastics thing where we were supposed to do cartwheels and like stand on our heads and human pyramids and that kind of thing. But I can't do a cartwheel. I just tried and tried and tried to do a cartwheel. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do a handstand. I don't like all the blood rushing to my head when I'm upside down. And also I realized later on that it was because my wrists couldn't like hold me, you know. It was not just because I was scared, because that was a thing. I was scared of being upside down. And I was overly flexible in a way. I hadn't like trained flexibility, and so I couldn't hold myself upside down. I don't know. I did do ballet when I was small, and that was a thing that I did performances in front of my mom's friend and her husband from the beginning. And that was a thing that dog of theirs kept interrupting. I was really focused in dancing. But after that, I couldn't do any other sports. It was difficult for me. I liked putting on a performance, which is an interesting thing. I think that a lot of autistic children are really into performance arts. I think maybe INFPs, introverts in general, maybe. But I was really into performing, and then I stopped. But so sports was not my thing, and it really frustrated me when the sports teachers kept thinking that I was not doing enough. And then all of the other kids thought that I was lazy and not doing enough as well. You know, it's kind of like this mentality that goes around when really you just, no matter how many times you're trying, it's not working. And instead of maybe thinking like, maybe this girl needs to be more in contact with her body, maybe she could try out some yoga or some mindfulness, or maybe she needs to focus on easier tasks than doing this whole cartwheel thing. Maybe we can separate between the levels or something. No, instead everybody had to do the same thing, and it was really awful. So yeah, not my best experience. And then there was this whole thing of that I didn't talk in school. In kindergarten, everybody was like, oh, she doesn't talk, but it was like, it was my fault or my parents' fault. It wasn't like a thing that led to anything. Then there was the fact that there was a teacher who said that I was extremely anxious. Like, she wrote very anxious on my report card when I was in middle school. And it was like, wait, a child who is very well behaved and who is always anxious, wouldn't you want to like ask their parents about that? Like, instead of blaming the child for being very scared and very anxious, maybe you could ask the parents if she's like that at home too, or if there's something about the teacher, I was scared of this teacher because she was like so close-minded about this kind of thing. And my parents didn't know what to reply about the fact that I was very nervous. But it's not making me less nervous to know that I'm being graded on the fact if I'm nervous or not. So yeah, I mean, that's not only autism, but if there's a child who's being anxious for like no reason, and then no matter how many times that you're saying it, something is mentally harmed in this child. If it's trauma or if it's autism, I do not know, but there is something going on. It's not, children are not just anxious to be difficult, they're not anxious to hate on you specifically as a teacher, they don't want to be anxious either. So yeah, I wonder always about that. Like, why did she even think that? Like, what did she think that my parents were going to do with that information? Everybody was like, get good self-esteem, just work on your confidence. It's like, oh, that's hard if everybody's always putting you down all the time. Then there's also, later on, once I became an adult, therapists who have been shitty to me and who haven't seen autism. Nobody saw autism until that therapist who was shitty as on her own, but the other ones just didn't see it. And one of them was that old therapist. I've talked about him on the channel. I met him twice because I tried to give him a second chance. But he said that me having executive functioning difficulties, such as not managing to do the dishes in the sink, was me having bad values, basically. I was focusing on social media instead of doing dishes, because I valued social media rather than the dishes. And he said that if I valued social media more than dishes, then he couldn't help me. And it was like, no. It wasn't. It's like I don't enjoy doing the dishes. I'd rather be on the internet, because it relaxes me, even though, yes, it is a flow of information. It feels more relaxing. If he had done some research into ADHD and autism, maybe he would have realized why is she telling me about her difficulties of doing the dishes specifically? The dishes, it doesn't give you a dopamine kick. There's this whole thing of reward. It's not about values being wrong. It's about your reward system being out of whack and your focus being difficult and your amount of energy not being spent well. And that's why I have a hard time with dishes, is because I'm looking at my dishes pile. That's why I'm looking over there. It's it gives me some dopamine once I'm done with the dishes, but the whole process of doing the dishes is not fun for me because of sensory things and because of executive functioning just being so low and so bad. I can start doing the dishes and then I get really tired, and I have to take a break, and then it's like, am I going to start again? And I don't think that that I don't value dishes, and so that was like wrong. So that is somewhere where, he could have noticed, maybe you have ADHD. No, he didn't do that. And I noticed that in other people, in other therapists as well. And there was this other therapist who said that my reason why I didn't click with other therapists was because there was something wrong with me, that I was not ready for therapy because I was not clicking with therapists. And that's not true, because you need to test out different therapists. But now I realize that a part of that, why it's like that, is because I just couldn't. It was difficult for me to meet a new person, and for somebody to click with me, they have to understand to a certain degree my neurodivergence. Even if they don't see what neurodivergence is, they have to kind of understand how a neurodivergent brain works. And I didn't find that in that therapist or in the therapist before that. And so I think that therapists also need to think of like, why am I not clicking with this person? And not put all the blame directly on the client, and think like, maybe they have a problem that I'm not used to dealing with, or maybe my style is not for them, but and one of those things might be, they might be neurodivergent. Their brain might not be working like every other brain. And so maybe that's why what I am trying to do is not working for them. But yeah, we're not there yet in terms of therapy and therapist training. So there's that. And then, there's also the fact that I've noticed that I relate to a lot of patients who have autism. Maybe I could have myself realized that I had autism through them. But that's another thing, that's not other people noticing, but we do have people at my workplace who work with autistic people, and maybe they could have helped me out there. I don't know. And another thing was also when I went through medical school, sometimes I had to do evaluations on patient meetings, and the way I would speak to patients was not the right way. I don't know what the right way really is, but my way is different than another doctor. And certain people got really frustrated at me for doing it wrong. Like, they would say that my patient meeting was not good, but then like the patient was happy because they would ask the patient afterwards. And so the patient was happy, and I got to a diagnosis. And so I felt like it worked. It wasn't like the way that you're supposed to do it, but it worked. And I know this, it's kind of like, there's people who are really good at math, and they're like not doing it the same way as the teacher has told them, but it worked. But the math teacher gets really annoyed by that. That's kind of the feeling that I got with these patient meetings that were recorded and such, is that I'm not asking the same questions as maybe somebody else would ask, and I might not explain things in the same way that a regular doctor would explain it. But it doesn't mean it's the wrong way either. It's just another way of doing it. And I think those doctors who were grading me and who were saying that I'd never manage if I was doing things in this way, it might just think 2 seconds and realize, everybody is different. And there are people like me in the medical profession that, and it works for them. So, yeah, that's where I'm going to end it at, because now we're, I kind of went from childhood until adulthood. Obviously, there's probably a lot more from childhood that I could bring up. I'm thinking of maybe getting, if I can try to get the report that my mom did on me, if I can get those journal copies of what my mom wrote about me, for my assessment, because that would really maybe give me some insight about how I was as a child that I don't remember. My memory is really shit, so I don't remember most of my childhood. And it's not because I was traumatized, but it was just that I just have a bad memory. So I think that would be a really interesting thing to read, to find out a little bit more about how I was and how that could have led to an autism diagnosis earlier, maybe. Or just, signs that I was autistic, even, that could maybe help me understand myself now. That would be interesting. So yeah, this is a long video. I hope that you're having a great day, and bye.